Assalamu alaikum viewers and students. Today is the 8th lecture in the lecture series on the subject of sociology. My name is Sir Mohammad Zeeshan. I am a lecturer in sociology. I am a PhD scholar and also PPSC lecturer topper. Now our today's topic of discussion is social groups, its types and related concepts. Now first of all, what does social group mean? Social group is basically two or more people who identify with and interact with one another. However, not every collection of individuals forms a group. People all over the country with a status in common like women, homeowners, soldiers, millionaires, college graduates are not a group, but they are considered as a category. Now group, as you can see, at least two or more than two people who have some common goal can be considered as a group. Whereas category comprises of a significant number of people or a significant portion of people having similar characteristics like which are mentioned here. Now, what are some of the major types of social groups? First one is primary group. This is basically a small social group whose members share personal and lasting relationships. For example, family. Whereas second type is secondary group, a large and impersonal social group whose members pursue a specific goal or activity. For instance, your office colleagues or your friends. Now, if you can see in this slide, there is a comparison that is given between the primary and secondary groups. First is the quality of relationship. In primary group, the quality of relationship has personal orientation, while in secondary group, it has goal orientation. The duration of relationships in primary group is usually long term, while in secondary group, it is variable, often short term. The breadth of relationships are broad in primary groups involving many activities, while in secondary group it involves only few activities. The perception of relationship is that it is end in themselves, whereas in secondary group it is a means to an end. And its examples include family, circles of friends, and secondary group includes co-workers and political organizations. Now the next concept is group leadership. There are two main leadership roles and groups typically benefit from these two types. The first one is instrumental leadership, where leadership focuses on the completion of tasks. That is, members look to instrumental leaders to make plans, give orders and get the things done. While the second type is expressive leadership, which in contrast to the instrumental leadership focuses on the group's well-being. Expressive leaders take less interest in achieving goals rather than in raising group morale and minimizing the tension and conflict among members. Now, along with that, there are some leadership styles. Three leadership styles are mentioned here. First one is authoritarian leadership, which focuses on instrumental concerns and take personal charge of decision making and demands the group members obey their orders. This method leadership style is basically more effective where quick decisions or a situation of crisis needs to be tackled in a timely manner. Second comes the democratic leadership, which is more expressive and makes point of including everyone in the decision making process. Sometimes it is less successful, especially in crisis situations, and democratic leaders generally draw on the idea of all the members in order to develop creative solution to problems. The last but not the least, laissez-faire leadership. Laissez-faire is basically a French word which means leave it alone or leave to do, where the group is allowed to function more or less on its own. And this type is typically the least effective in promoting the group goals. Now the next concept is group conformity. Groups influence the behavior of their members by promoting conformity. In other words, you can say fitting in, that is to provide a secure feeling of belonging, but at the extreme, group pressure can be unpleasant and even dangerous. Now, group conformity is basically when all the members or majority of the members of a group are in favor of one decision, while some or few members they do not agree with the majority's decision, but because of that group pressure, which is known as group conformity or trying to please everyone, they accept to the demands or the requirements of the majority of the group members. Now, study experiments were conducted by Solomon Asch and Stanley Milgram, which showed that even strangers can encourage conformity. Now, the first study is Solomon Asch's study, how group pressure and conformity puts his pressure or influences the group members. Conformity is basically adjusting one's behavior of thinking to coincide with a group standard. And Solomon Asch experiment actors picked the wrong line, then people were coerced by conformity to pick something they knew something that the line they have selected is wrong. Now Solomon Asch has conducted a study in which he has presented a card on which three lines were drawn, and the experiment group member on which the experiment was to be conducted, you can say, rest of the members knew that they had to select the wrong line, that was line number C, and they were told that you had to select line C, that this is the longest line, while we can clearly see that line B was the longest. However, Solomon Asch wanted to study that if majority of the group members select a wrong line and they are so convinced that this is the right one, that will ultimately make the test subject confused and he will also select this same line. Basically, he wanted to study this concept. And alone less than 1% made mistake, in groups wrong 33% of the time. And as a result of that, majority of the members knowing that, test subjects knowing that line B was the longest, they, because of group pressure and conformity, opted line C. Therefore, confirming the fact that as a result of group pressure, the members who basically knew that what they are selecting or the decision of the majority of the group members, even though it is wrong, but as a result of that pressure and in order to conform themselves to the group norms, they accept that decision or they accept the demands of the majority of the group members. Second study was the Milgram shock experiment, a famous study conducted in 1963 by Stanley Milgram, in which basically a fake test subject was, you can say, he was allowed to sit with the buzzer lines, electronic current lines attached to him, and the experimenter urges the participants, that is the subject, and the subject was unaware of the fact that the line, the electric current line which was attached, was fake. However, the experimenter forced the subject to increase the shock level with every wrong answer. Few questions were given to the fake test subject, and on every wrong answer he is to be administered an electric shock. Thus, Milgram shock experiment was the name given to this experiment. A researcher asks the participant to administer electric shocks to a test subject when he answers the questions incorrectly. The test subject is an actor. Basically, he was an actor, the fake subject, who makes noise of pain when he receives the shocks. The participant is made to believe that each shock is stronger than the last one. As this fake test subject, you can say, he deliberately answered the wrong answers for every question which the experimenter asked, the subject was forced to increase the level of intensity of the shock, and thus his pain, or which he was pretending, he started to feel the pain more and more as the shock level was increased by the subject on the orders of the experimenter. And this shows that even a stranger person can be coerced to do something in which he or she is unwilling to do, but as a result of the pressure, because of the social status or position the person holds, which in this case was the experimenter, who had wore a white gown to give an impression that he was a researcher, he was a scientist, and the subject had to obey his command and had to administer the pain on the subject. So this was a study which was also used to focus on the concept of group pressure and conformity. Now the third concept is groupthink. Groupthink was a term first used in 1972 by social psychologist Irving Janis and refers to a psychological phenomena in which people strive for consensus within a group. In many cases, people will set aside their own personal belief or adopt the opinion of the rest of the group. Now this thing also occurs as a result of group pressure and group conformity. When all of the members, they try to conform to the majority of the group members' norms. Basically, people who are opposed to the decisions or overriding opinion of the group as a whole, frequently remain quiet, preferring to keep the peace rather than disrupt the uniformity of the crowd. So basically in groupthink what happens that it is a big possibility, huge possibility that not all the members in a group they accept to a particular decision. There is an in most of the cases there is a chance that few members they basically do not accept the majority's opinion. However, they do not want to create a fuss, and in order to do that they you frequently remain quiet and prefer to keep peace rather than disrupt the uniformity of the group in which they are part. And in order to understand this thing, first we need to understand that why does groupthink occur. You can say think when you are part of a group, perhaps during a school project. Imagine someone proposes an idea you think is quite poor. However, everyone else in the group agrees with the person who suggested the idea and the group seems set on pursuing that course of action. Do you voice your dissent or do you just go along with the majority opinion? Now this is a question, for instance, a scenario in case some of us has to be in this situation where one faces this dilemma, and most of the people they usually some of the people they voice their dissent while most of the people try to remain quiet and accept the majority's opinion. This is what groupthink is. Now after that there are different types of groups like I've mentioned before, primary and secondary group. Other types include reference group, a social group that serves as a point of reference in making evaluation and decisions. In group is a group which a member feels part of and feels respect and loyalty. Out group is a group toward which a person feels a sense of competition or opposition. And social diversity means cultural differences between people of diverse cultural backgrounds living in a specific area. Now the next concept is group size. According to George Simmel, he used the term dyad, which is a Greek word for pair, to designate a social group with at least two members. Also, second word is triad, a social group in which there are three members and each uniting two of the three people. Now, network is a web of weak social ties. Think of a network as a fuzzy group containing people who come into occasional contact but who lack a sense of boundaries and belonging. Now, what does formal organization mean and what are its major types? Formal organizations are basically large secondary groups organized to achieve their goals efficiently. And according to Amitai Etzioni, he has identified three types of formal organizations, which are utilitarian organization, that is those organizations that pays people for their efforts. For example, any office, business, etc. Second are normative organizations in which people do not join for income but pursue some goal they think is morally worthwhile. Its example includes voluntary associations, NGOs, social welfare organizations, political parties, religious organizations, etc. Third is coercive organizations in which membership is involuntary and people are forced to join these organizations as a form of punishment. For instance, prisons or treatment in some psychiatric hospitals. Now, the difference between small groups and formal organizations is provided here. As far as activities are concerned, in small groups, activities are same for all the members, while in formal organizations, they are distinct and highly specialized. Hierarchy in small groups is often informal or non-existent, while in formal organizations, every position is clearly defined. Norms in small groups are generally informal, whereas in formal organizations there are clearly defined rules and norms. The membership criteria for small groups is variable and based on personal affection or kinship, while in formal organizations membership is based on technical competence and people are selected on merit. The relationships in small groups are variable and typically primary, while in formal organizations the relationships are typically secondary. Communication in small groups is casual and face-to-face, while in formal organizations it is formal and in written form. In small groups the focus is person-oriented, while in formal organization the focus is task-oriented. Now next concept is bureaucracy, which is a very important concept in sociology. What are its characteristics and what are some of the problems that are faced in bureaucracy? Now bureaucracy is an organizational model rationally designed to perform tasks efficiently. Bureaucratic officials regularly create and revise the policy to increase efficiency. Now its characteristics include specialization, hierarchy of position, rules and regulations, technical competence, impersonality, formal and written communication. While the problems of bureaucracy include bureaucratic alienation, bureaucratic inefficiency and ritualism, bureaucratic inertia, and oligarchy. So this is all for today's lecture. Do like and subscribe for more such videos. Until then, Allah Hafiz.